unlock this door with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension. It is the middle ground between science and superstition, and it lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge. You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. You've just crossed over into the light zone.
You may not have realized it, but you just have left JNation. It's going to be crucial to stay calm for what comes next, because you have been thrust into a new dimension known as the IT zone. So here you are in 50 after Unix, so in 2020 of our era, in a small country of Western Europe named France. You are now a project manager within its Ministry of Education. The French government has recently committed in modernizing its education system, and you have been tasked in leading this reform. Nevertheless, like any self-respecting organization, top-down is never far away, and you have been strongly encouraged to enlist the services of external consulting companies. Before you even have a chance to voice your concern, your manager explained to you that this directive comes from the big boss himself, slipping in the suggestion to add the McKinney consulting company in the bidding process along the way. So McKinney, you already heard about them, but you don't really know what they do. So you decide to go on their website, this one, the real one running production. I'll translate that in English for you. Here. So for now, we don't see a lot about them. There is the Arc de Triomphe, which is a French sign that means that you're a winner, you know. But there is something really important there. You can see that McKinney is written with an S we don't pronounce in the IT zone, just because I don't want to be shot by them after the end of that talk. So the aim here is to know how they can actually help you in the reform of the education sector of the French government. By scrolling a bit, you have here their first value proposition. They state to be an accelerator of innovation in more than 200 areas of expertise, which means this is a quite big consulting company. But right in the middle, they state to have more than 5,000 technological profiles, which is a bit weird, right? Why are they just unfazing one of their areas of expertise? Does it mean this is more a tech consulting company than the other thing? But never mind. After that, they try to create some empathy with you by introducing you to some of their team members. But don't get them wrong, you're here on the home page. So they are not anybody. You have here the managing director of McKinney in France, one member of the Global Executive Committee, and one leader of one business unit. And if you click on those people, they have a dedicated page. But unfortunately, it doesn't really mean a thing to you, right? Since it's not really helpful for your mission. Going back to the main page there, you have the first call to action that discover some other profile. So let's discover who are those people. And once again, they are not anybody. You have here directors and senior directors of McKinney, and each of them is lead business units, such as industrial strategies and operational transformation of industrial peers. I don't even know what it means, but sounds clever. There is the McKinney Cancer Center, so maybe they have hospital and medics. I did not expect that. And digital division, because who doesn't have a digital division today? But perhaps someone is dedicated for education. Doesn't sound well. Anyway, let's go back to the main page and discover what they're supposed to know, what they're supposed to do. After that, you have their publication. This is a good thing. This is a demonstration of their know-how. But unfortunately, you will see here nothing about education. Construction sector, health treatment. You have fusion nexus of carbon-free energy in Europe. So it looks like they have physicists as well. Didn't expect that. But nothing related to education. And then you have one section taking the full page that invites you to work for them. And now you're really confused. Because you start wondering to who has been built that website for potential consumers like you, because here you're not even the profile for working for them, or for potential candidates. And it ends with the location of their office in Paris. So it's been a good 5 minutes on that website. You still don't know how they can actually help you, right? But when you led it to that page, you remember that there were some menu on the really top of it. This is a great user experience, by the way, with a tab named Our Job. Let's discover what their job is. And it looks like their job is 3D rotating balls. So that will only emphasizes the feeling that they try to position themselves on the tech industry, despite the fact you don't really care about that. So you're really about to give up. When you see that little animation there on the arrow, it invites you to scroll a bit more. And what do you discover? They have a matrix organization with sectoral functional skin center. You don't really care about that, right? But if you dig a lot more, you will see that here there is a page dedicated to education with what they know about it, what they do with their clients, publications, and because they really like that formula, it ends with the people working on that business unit. With the top of consulting crop, you will only have here senior partners and partners. The poor little business analyst won't even get a mention there. So in the end, you learn more about McKinney organization and how they could the org chart than how they can actually help you. So you live then with a frustrating sense of being unfulfilled. And this feeling doesn't come from nowhere. This is a clear sign that you just encoded the IT zone. So the IT zone is a world where science and belief blend together. This is a realm governed by unseen forces that has a strong impact on how people will build systems. Because here, we might be tempted to point fingers out the UX designers of McKinney for this poor user experience, but in fact, it exists a phenomenon beyond their control that partly drives them to design the website that way. To find this phenomenon, we need to go back to 1998. The New York Times published then a front page story that altered the landscape of the IT zone by showcasing the remarkable achievement of the Dr. Jacob Nielsen. And despite what this picture might imply, he's not the one who invented the mouse, although he seems quite delighted to be holding one in his hand. Really weird photography, right? But the Dr. Jacob Nielsen at that time was considered as the guru of the web page usability. He's one of the pioneers of the user experience. And in the late 90s, he set out in a mission to make the web more usable. Because he noticed that at that time, companies creating their own website were trying to over-optimize one search engine indexing metric that you know as the... Sorry? I don't hear you. It's the SEO? CEO? SEO? You heard that, SEO? But in fact, something older than the SEO. This is the CEO. You never heard about that? That's the C-level ego optimization. But you're laughing, but it's a real thing. Actually, in an article he wrote in 1997, Topc mistake for web management, top 3 mistake is letting the site structure mirror your org chart. He said that users should not have to care about how your company is organized, so they should not be able to deduce your organizational structure from the structure of your website. And a classic sign of a mismanaged website is when on the home page you have a button for each of the senior vice presidents in the company. Something you definitely didn't experience at all in 2024, right? So, he's backed up in his observation by another pioneer of the user experience, the Dr. Nigel Bevan. In an article of 1998, he wrote that organization often produce a website with a content and a structure which mirrors the internal concern of the organization rather than the needs of the user of the website. So that's why on the McKinney website, they are pushing a lot about the fact that they're hiring and the fact that they are trying to position themselves on the tech industry, despite of the fact that you don't care about it at all. So since late 90s, we know this is a bad pattern. Why are we keeping doing such things in 2024? As you dig deeper for answer, you find yourself transported to a new area of the IT zone, and now you are in Redmond, near Seattle in the United States, in 38 after Unix, so in 2008. You are now the marketing directors working at Microsoft, and you are creating a strategy to boost the sales of the commercial hit of that time. That was, remember, the main product of Microsoft 2008? Windows Vista. No? Did some people cried about it? And suddenly, your boss burst into your office in a rage because one competitor just released that ad campaign.
Hello, I'm a Mac.
And I'm a PC, here with good news for anyone who's ever been frustrated by Vista.
Oh, you're fixing the problem.
No, I'm making them easier to live with my new line of calming teas. There's Crashy Time Chamomile, just the thing to soothe the nerves after a Vista-related crash. Or if Vista's making your applications run slow, there's Pomegranate Patience. Now, mornings are raspberry restart time for
That's
me.
great, PC.
Also afternoons, but...
We should move on.
Yes, let's move on, Mac, to my line of Vista stress-relieving bath salts.
So it's a real ad they made. It's a complete disaster. Your competitor is openly mocking the flaws of your new flagship product. Because indeed, tired of the incompatibility problems and the frequent crashes, your customer are either choosing to going back to Windows XP, your previous operating system, or for the first time, they are going to the beaten Apple competitor. The pressure is so high that you have to let PC manufacturers to sell new machines under Windows XP instead of Vista. But in the midst of this unfortunate situation, two researchers from Microsoft and one from the University of Maryland began to wonder if they can turn this situation into an opportunity for a study. So they kicked out an analysis of the 50 million lines of code spread across the more than 3,000 binaries modules of Vista. And the aim of this study was to evaluate how well traditional quality indicators can predict software bugs in production. Because now they know which modules of Vista had production bugs. So they try to figure out if there is a correlation between the fact that maybe this module had a low code coverage and the fact that it had production bugs. So amongst those indicators, you had the code churn, which is the amount of code you have to change each time you want to add something. The code complexity, you may know that as well as the cyclomatic complexity. Dependencies in the coupling, code coverage, also know that as the test coverage. And pre-release bugs in the number of bugs detected before the release. But before doing that analysis, they added another indicator, which was the organizational structure, which is totally odd, right? Because this one is not technical at all. So to be a good predictor of software bugs in production, those indicators must have a precision and a recall as close as 100%. I won't explain the difference, but here are the results. And as you can see, the organizational structure had the best score. Surprising. So in this study of 2008, the researchers have demonstrated that in the case of Vista, the state of the organization was a better predictor of software bugs in production than the code coverage. So to paraphrase Peter Drucker, organization its code quality tools at breakfast. It's not Sonar that will be able to help you if you are performing some scale agile frameworks such as SAFe. Sorry for the people running SAFe, but in fact, they were trying to demonstrate one statement that was done several decades before, in 1975, by the Dr. Frederick Brooks. In the Mythical Man-Month book, he said that product quality is strongly affected by organization structure. By the way, this book is not for the faint-hearted believers in the Gantt chart cult, as it might give them a serious case of heartburn. So, do you sense that slight tingle at the back of your neck? This is because you have been taken another leap. Just to make sure you're still awake. This is the sound of the train pulling you to London in 46 after Unix, so 2016, and you make your way to the headquarters of the multinational online travel company you are working for as an architect. You have defined the architecture of the train ticket reservation system as follows. You found that it was the best solution to address the business needs of your company. Because your company is selling train tickets all over the world. But each country is handling the train differently. Since your company wants to offer a standardized and uniform user experience for your user, and don't want to do custom development for each of these countries, this architecture is broken down in 3 agnostic components regarding those countries. Here you have Rail Supply, which is an aggregator of carriers API, like Comboios in Portugal, I think, Renfe in Spain, or SNCF in France. everything gathered in a single API. On top of it, you have rail shopping, which is dedicated for all the business logic, but agnostic from the countries. So you have here how to search for a train, how to select your seat, and so on, in a uniform form. And on top of it, you have the UI. So this architecture has been defined 3 years ago. And it's no time for you to come down your ivory tower as an architect to see what the developers have done. Because you heard that even though those systems are quite new, they are already really hard to maintain in production. So you took a look at the code and, oh my God, what was delivered was exactly what we were trying to avoid. Each component can be divided by countries using if statements. And as a result, some features have been deprecated by country instead of being shared as planned. So what went wrong? Is it a matter of insufficient skills of the development team? After some investigation, you find that in fact, it came from one belief of the management, which is called the feature team. So the feature team is a concept which intends to boost the autonomy of a team by letting them to intervene in each layers of the information system to implement a feature. But usually that feature is an entire project, and once done, they will do something else. Who will maintain that? No one knows. And here the management had 3 teams that were each on different time zones, and they found that it would be easier to manage if they specialize them by country, right? Because, you know, the rollout planning production was to doing first an MVP for France, another one from the British market, and finally one for the German one. However, all of those teams are working on the same code base, but they have different managers, different time zones, different deadlines, different objectives. So they have little reason to communicate and collaborate, right? So this belief and the pressure to deliver led to teams protecting themselves for the others to secure the deadline using that if my case statement. And that's why we ended up in that situation. And the worst part of that story is that since the ownership of each component here is not clear at all, no one wants to bear with the cost of the technical debt. So it seems that the IT zone is trying to send you a message. It looks like that your user experience and your product design, the product and code quality, and your architecture are strongly impacted by your organization. So far, we have seen only symptoms. But what can be an explanation of all of those things? To find this explanation, we need to go further in history. In 1968, the Dr. Melvin Conway published then an article named How Do Committees Invent, where he explores how company or organization design systems. And now we'll do a little exercise that you will be able to reproduce on your own organization, but your management will get upset about it. So let's consider an e-commerce platform. It's made up of 4 subsystems. Here you have user management. Shopping is everything related to the product catalog and your cart, the payment, and the billing system. A system can be whatever you want. It can be a web page, a software product, but it can be also your phone or even a car. Melvin Conway wonders if it exists a relationship between the structure of that system and the organization in charge of it. So he did a little exercise, and he figured out that whatever the context, you will be able to find for each of these subsystems a team in the organization in charge of it. Quite easy to do, right? But to make sure that the whole system works, some of these subsystems need to interface with each other. For example, here between user and shopping. In information technology, an interface can be data transfer through an API. What he points out at that time is that if you have 2 subsystems that need to interface with each other, then the related teams need to collaborate in order to negotiate a specification of this interface, a contract. And usually in large organizations, this cross-team communication is coordinated by a Scrum Master or Product Owner today. What we can notice as well is that when there is no link between subsystems, for example, shopping and billing, there is no requirement for the related teams to collaborate on anything. So Melvin Conway demonstrated then that there is a close relationship between the structure of the system and the structure of the organization in charge of it. It's not uncommon for a team to be in charge of several systems, right? In that case, the structure of the organization becomes a collapsed version of the structure of the system. Sometimes this is the opposite because you can have several teams on the same system. So what we can clearly see here is that there is a kind of similarity of the structure between the structure of the organization and the structure of the system. And this similarity is what we call an homomorphism. And maybe now you think that Melvin Conway didn't invent something groundbreaking, by saying that. But in fact, behind this homomorphism, there are some properties that can be really annoying when we build systems, and especially when we do software. To give you some example, let's say that we are really beginning of a project. We have the business need, the problem, but for now we didn't define the solution yet. However, the management has already defined this organization with these teams. As you know, the role of an organization is to find the best solution that meets the business needs by comparing all the possible solutions according to their advantages and disadvantages. So here, to simplify the problem, let's say we have only two options for the problems they need to solve. And let's assume that the second design is the best one here. But we are omniscient, right? For now, those teams didn't discover yet those solutions. If we compare the solution, what do we see? We see that in the second one, there is an interface between user and billing system that doesn't exist there. And there is a checkout subsystem here that has been spread across shopping and payment in the first version. So now, the million-dollar question is, will this predefined organization be able to discover and choose the second design, which is the best one? If you take a look at this organization, you see there is no formal communication between user and billing team, and there is no as well checkout team. So if you apply the homomorphism rule, they should rather choose the first option, which is not the best one. Why? Because user and billing team, they may not realize that by communicating with each other, by collaborating, they will be able to find a better design for the system by introducing here an interface between user and billing systems. But the worst part is about shopping and payment teams. How do you want them to envision the emergence of a checkout system that sits across their scopes when this is the management who has predefined their scopes? And that has a strong impact on the way they think about the problem, you know? And as you may know, usually in companies, the structure of the organization and communication is not really flexible. That's why this organization will be constrained in producing a system that looks like the organization. And the larger is the organization, the more pronounced this tendency becomes. That's why Melvin Conway says that the very act of choosing an organization means that you are making decisions regarding the design, explicitly or not. And the act of choosing an organization will narrow down the range of the possible solution by potentially excluding designs that could be better. To give you a concrete example of that, Melvin Conway talked about one organization in the 60s that were in charge of building a COBOL compiler and an ALGOL compiler. Because they had timing issues, they decided to split and assign 5 people on the COBOL compiler and 3 on the ALGOL one. As a result, the COBOL compiler ran in 5 phases, while the ALGOL one only in 3. Despite the fact this is quite the same software to build. But not everyone agreed with this observation. A new perspective came from Topc in 1996 that said that if you were to task 5 people in building a COBOL compiler, that compiler will run in 4 phases instead of 5 because someone has to be the manager. But let's go back to, So this is just one effect about the organization regarding the structure of the system you build. But there is some other effect as well. So let's say, once again, we are really beginning of a project. Usually, we don't put a lot of people when we only have the problem to analyze to avoid overcrowding. So let's say we have 2 initial designers there. But a manager is never to find this matter, and a manager knows that they will be blamed if they miss the deadline without employing all the people they have at their disposal. And that will create some kind of pressure on the initial designers that would prefer tackling the complexity of the problem until they can reduce it in a way they can find a simple solution instead of having to fragment the knowledge by delegating to others. However, since the management deems it's too risky to proceed this way, they will have no choice but to delegate to reinforcement, themselves reinforce, to secure the deadline as much as possible. According to Conway, this is rooted inside the belief that work effort is something linear, meaning for some people, especially the Gantt chart people culture, the work of 2 people on 4 months is equivalent to the work of 4 people on 2 months. And to make fun of that, Frederick Brooks in his book said that the bearing of a child takes 9 months, no matter how many women are assigned to the task. But let's go back to our organization that has grown a lot. As you know, in companies we have management guidelines, HR guidelines, such as 2 pizza teams, 1 manager per team, and these rules will shape the organization, establishing a hierarchy based on delegation. Because here, the initial designers, they have some knowledge already, right? So they will take the lead. So it means that we will have, the organization will take forms even before knowing what kind of solution we would like to build. And once the organization exists, it gets used. But now you have a lot of people, right? So you have to keep them busy. So what do? You take that problem and you arbitrarily split it and split it again to make sure that everyone has a small amount of it. It implies that some intersection of responsibility, like this zone in gray here, will go unnoticed. Because by delegating to subgroups, you have created scopes that will act as blinders for these groups. And this is basically what we call in management silos. So that's why there is no such thing as a design group which is both organized and unbiased. But Melvin Conway said something even worse about the homomorphism effect. He said that at the very moment we had delegation, we had a disintegration of the communication, which implied the disintegration of the quality of the system. Sounds complicated, but I will explain it in simpler words. So the initial designers there, they have to step back from the problem analysis to do some coordination, knowledge transfer. However, these step backs weaken their understanding of the problem. And now, if you take 2 people from hierarchically distant teams that need to agree about something like an interface, the decision-making process becomes even more complex. Because if they do disagree, what say management guidelines, what we should do? We go up the delegation chain, right? And we employ people that are further from the analysis of the problem. And if those people disagree, we go up again, involving people that are even more further from the problem, and most of the time they are not technical at all. And they have to take a decision in 1 hour regarding really complicated technical stuff. That's why in the end, the structure of the communication will tend to align with the hierarchical structure of the company. And by homomorphism, it will be reflected in the systems they build. According to Conway, this is why military people tend to create a system that looks like the org chart. If you take a look at a COBOL program, it's designed like a regiment in division and section. So that's why the structure of large systems tend to disintegrate during development, qualitative morphs than with small systems because of that amount of people there. The disintegration of communication, Frederick Brooks illustrated it well in another way. He said that when we had 3 people in the team, we had only 3 channels of communication. But when we moved to 11 people, we didn't move to 11 channels of communication as well. We moved to 55 channels. So it means that the effort of communication is not linear at all. So it implies that the work effort cannot be neither. And we have seen also that a system built by 3 people won't look like a system built by 11 ones. And Melvin Conway adds that 3 well-picked people will create you a better system because all assumption of parallelism that might be true when you are peeling potatoes goes up in smoke when you are designing systems. And this tendency to add more and more people to secure the deadline will lead the organization toward its bureaucratic forms with overhead of communication and synchronization. That's why, in the end, it becomes necessary to restrict communication in order to that people can get some work done. This is counterintuitive, but this is true. Who here ever complained about having too many ceremonies or meetings? The others are Scrum Masters. I'm joking, but yeah, but it comes from there. Okay, so I didn't state the law yet, but the Conway's law states that the organization which designs systems are constrained to produce design which are copies of the communication structure of this organization. So that's why on the McKinney website, the first thing you discovered was the org chart, starting from the top. And as you digged into the website, the further you were going down the layer of the org chart. The second thing you discovered was their matrix organization, even before knowing how they can actually help you. So this is a good example, even today, where you have an organization that has its communication structure that perfectly aligned with their organizational structure and ended up in the systems they built, their website. In the case of the online travel company, despite the fact that the system was thought to be agnostic from the countries, the teams ended up by creating a country-divided systems because they were themselves organized by country. And you have seen also that in the case of Windows Vista, the quality of the organization has a strong impact on the quality of the software. So that's an homomorphism effect because one property on the organization has a strong impact on the same property on the product, the system. I didn't tell you what they put inside organizational structure. They were checking 8 statements. I only listed 3 of them, and I will have time to read one of them only. The closer the person with decision-making power over a component is to the engineer who built it, the better the quality. And as you can see, this is exactly at the opposite regarding the disintegration of communication that was saying Conway. And once again, it's not a coincidence. So maybe now you're wondering if we can avoid the Conway law. So in fact, you can't. It will apply whatever your context. However, you can learn how to better manage its effects. So Conway explains that the design effort must be organized according to the need of communication. What it means is that first, your problem, you have to split it in smaller problems that will be easier to solve. With that, you will find your subsystems. Then the subsystems, you need to define the ways they need to integrate to each other to make sure that the whole system will work. And once you have that, you can define an organization in a way that its structure of communication will be restricted to what is strictly necessary, according to the interfaces here. However, the first design is never the best one, and we know that businesses will evolve with time. So it means that this organization may be flexible enough in its structure to be able to continue designing or building software effectively. So here, without explaining how to proceed for each of these steps, Melvin Conway just created a new kind of organization and system design that will be called later as the inverse Conway maneuver. So this term was coined by Jolly Leroy and Matt Simmons in 2010, and the idea is to break down the silos between teams that limit their efficiency by reorganizing. However, it might not be realistic to do a reorganization in every case. And keep in mind that this is a structure of the communication that will be reflected in the system, not directly the hierarchical one. It will be easier to have an impact on the way people are communicating than addressing the sensitive topic of a reorganization. But in 2015, the IT zone sees the rise of the microservices. And James Lewis had this funny idea to say that a team should focus on a structure that corresponds to the systems they want to build, instead of asking existing team to follow an architecture on paper. Otherwise, you will have the negative effect of the Conway law. So to see how to proceed an inverse Conway maneuver, I have to explain you one other model, which is the BAPO model, that will drive our way through the inverse Conway maneuver. So the BAPO model was coined by Jan Bosch, professor at the Chalmers University of Technology and former vice president of the Nokia Research Center. And the idea of that model is to say that you should always start by defining how you want to create values for your users and how you want to generate revenues. This is the B here, the starting point of that method, which stands for business. Once you have defined the business and how you will make money, then you can think about the architecture that will achieve that business and all the related technical choices. Once the architecture is defined, then you can think about all the processes required to build that architecture. And once the B, the A, and the P are defined, you can know now which kind of competencies are required to do all the things. So finally, you can think about the organization. But what Jan Bosch noticed is that usually the companies are not BAPO, they are OPAB instead, the opposite. They start with an existing organization, and they define processes out of sheer convenience from that. For example, you have Michael, since 10 years, he's a validator. You will end up with a validation process, even though you don't really know what's the value of that. It will create an accidental architecture driven by the past of the company instead of its future that will limit the ability of the company to do business and innovation. And he knows that, right? He was working at Nokia. Sorry for the troll, but anyway. And what is a bit remarkable there is that if we go back to Nigel Bevan, remember at the beginning of the talk, he gave us 5 steps to go over the problem we have seen on the McKinney website. And each of these steps maps perfectly with the BAPO model. But those steps are meant for a web page, so maybe you are wondering what we can do for a software product or an information system. Fortunately, we have hidden gems in the IT zone that will help you to do so. The first thing we'll see to deal with the B and the A is a revolution that occurred in the IT zone in 2003 with the publication of that book, Domain-Driven Design from Eric Evans. So the philosophy of domain-driven design is to put in the heart of software development the business, and always starting with the analysis of the business before going to the implementation or defining the architecture. So domain-driven design separate 2 spaces, the problem space, which corresponds to the business, and the solution space that corresponds to the architecture. Because we all have this bias as engineers to be already constructing a solution in our mind before having been fully explained the problem. So the guy is just explaining what he needs, and you are just thinking about REST, about databases and so on, but you didn't really understand what he needs. So that's why we do that separation. And we should always start from the analysis of the problem. To do so, you don't really need some fancy organization. You just need to take the expert, the business expert, you put them in a room with cross-functional people, and you make them talk about the business. And the aim here is to map out all the business concepts, business characteristics, so we can understand what is the business need. And technically, you can do that through an event storming, which is a workshop invented by Alberto Brandolini. This is quite simple and really powerful. Just to explain you that really quickly, all the participants are listing domain events that they think they are really important in the problems they are trying to solve on sticky notes. And then we will organize them according to some timelines, as you can see here. That will map out the flow of business value creation, and basically it will also map out your feature. Once we have done that, we will list all the concepts that are inside those business events, domain events, and we will analyze their life cycle. We'll see that some of them will evolve together, created together, die together. Some of them will be transformed. For example, the cart, at a certain period of time, will become an order. That will mark out some spaces. And these spaces, in fact, are your subsystems. This is what we call in domain-driven design bounded context. And once you have defined those spaces, those subsystems, you can start to explore the solution space, meaning doing some architecture. But here, I will show you one way to do some architecture that will take into account the Conway's law. And we'll do that through what we call a context map. This is the only tool I know that will help you to detect if you will have some kind of a negative effect regarding the Conway law. So the first thing you have to do is to list all the subsystems, here, user, shopping, payment, billing, and so on, and then define the ways they need to integrate with each other, to interface with each other. So here we have the payment subsystem that integrates with the shopping one through an openness service. So openness service is the old name for API. You can consider this is exactly the same thing. I won't explain ACL, it's not really important for that talk. Once you have done that, then you have to define what is the power balance between the systems regarding the business. You can have several ones. I will only give the example of one here, which is mutually dependent. Mutually dependent means that if one of them fails, both will fail. For example, I'm adding something in my cart, but I cannot pay. This is a failure for the user, right? I cannot put something in my cart, but I can pay. This is a failure as well. This is the idea of mutually dependent regarding if they are successful from a business standpoint. And why are we doing that? Because after we will see how the related teams are working together to see if there is some kind of orthogonality between the power balance regarding the business of the systems and the way the teams are working together. So let's say that here the related teams are working according to a customer-supplier relationship. There are several ones, we will only see this one here. That means that the payment team here need to negotiate in order for its needs to be prioritized in the backlog of the shopping team. And the shopping team we can say, nah, we'll do that later, because they have their own objectives. Is that a good idea when you know that if the payment fail, they will fail as well, shopping? Maybe they should enter another way to interact that is called the partnership, which means that they will have to create together their roadmaps, their backlogs, define how they will go in production and so on, to ensure they will be together successful. So this is basically a context map. I invite you to do some research about it. This is really interesting. I don't have time to explore every kind of relationship there is there. It was just to give you a sense of what is strategic domain-driven design that stands with the B and the A of the BAPO model. But that part won't give you much guidance on how to organize. It means that this is not domain-driven design. I will tell you if you need several teams on the same project, on the same system, sorry. And it won't talk about some supporting teams like the ops, the infrastructure. But fortunately for us, in 2019 is really team topologies. I don't know if some people heard about team topologies yet here. Okay, some of you. And team topologies, invented by Matthew Skelton and Manuel Pais, is a dynamic pattern of organization in the school of the inverse Conway maneuver that perfectly align with domain-driven design. It will help us to deal with the P process and the organization. So just to give you some insights, do you know how we build teams today, usually? We put more and more people until the team fits the complexity of the systems they are in charge of. So the more complex is the system, the more people you will have in the team. Team topology said we should do the opposite. We should rather limit the size of the software to the cognitive load of the team can handle. Otherwise, it will be drawn, right? So it means that the team should have enough bandwidth, mental bandwidth, to be able to design, create, operate, maintain a software. And it also means that you have a clear ownership between one software and one team with enough bandwidth to be able to be in charge of it. This is regarding some stuff regarding the process. I won't explain everything, but I talked about the dynamic pattern of organization. So I will explain you why this is dynamic regarding team topologies. To take some illustration there, so let's take again our e-commerce platform. In yellow here, you have the shopping and payment teams. Let's say that they discover that there's too much heaviness around their interfaces with some duplicated work. What states team topologies is that they can enter a new way of interaction, which is called the collaboration, which means that they will work closely together for a certain period of time to find a solution to problems they are not used to, this one. But it also means that their cognitive load is really higher because they also have to deal with their day-to-day job regarding their own subjects, right? So that's why this period should be as small as possible, otherwise they will burn out. Let's imagine that they found this is the best solution, introducing here a checkout system. According to team topologies, here we need to figure out if it represents or not too many cognitive load for both shopping and payment teams. If so, we will pop out a new team checkout. But now we know how those systems need to interface with each other, like payment need to interface with checkout, checkout need to interface with shopping. So we can enter another way of interaction between those teams, which is called X as a service. It means that the shopping team needs to provide a service to the checkout team that can be a documented API in a way that they are enough autonomous in its integration regarding the checkout part. Because the aim here is always to restrict the communication to what is strictly necessary. So I won't explain everything about team topologies. You have 3 ways of interaction, 4 kinds of teams. If you want to learn more about it, you can go to teamtopologies.com. And as you can see here, according to their website, Docker is using that as an organizational pattern. So we have seen that with the inverse Conway maneuver, we'll be able to better manage the effect of the Conway's law using as a driver the BIPO model implemented by domain-driven design and team topologies. If you have any doubt, you have to know that Accelerate, which is a scientific study released in 2018, regarding excellence of software delivery, this study tends to support the efficiency of the inverse Conway maneuver. But before you leave, you have to understand that this is not a magic wand at all. Like Matthias Vera said in one article of 2022, changing the organization won't ensure you to have the desired architecture. Because if the system is rigid to the modification, changing the organization will have a limited impact. To say that in another way, changing the organization won't fix a bad design. So it means that you will have to invest in the sanitization of your system to make it more flexible, even before thinking about reorganizing. And once again, the Conway's law is a constraint that will apply on whatever you do, whatever you organized. And the inverse Conway maneuver, a tool at our disposal to deal with its effect, but which is not a silver bullet. Keep in mind that you should first try to address how people are communicating with each other. If it's not enough, you can go on the reorganization level, but most of the time it's not at your hand, right? You have to be a manager or director to do so. And if both are not sufficient, it means that you will have to do some trade-off regarding the architecture and therefore some trade-off regarding the business. So my name is Julien Topc. I'm a technical coach at Shodo, French consulting company. In my great kindness, I brought you back to JNation, but beware of your belief and stay alert Otherwise, you will find yourself forever stuck in the IT zone. Thank you very much.